Hi, all, and welcome. I'd just like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us in our third webinar in MLA's Women of Color Partner Forum series. Our series was co-founded by your host today, Kim Mallett. My name is Lauren Horan. I'll be your technical moderator behind the scenes today. And before starting off and handing this over to Kim, I just want to run through a few quick housekeeping pointers. All attendees are in listen-only mode for the duration of the presentation and all cameras are off. As a reminder, the webinar is being recorded and we will send a link to everyone who has registered for the webinar. You may ask a question at any time and we encourage you to do so. At the bottom of your screen, you'll just see the Q&A button where you can submit your question, and all questions are anonymous. We will not share identity with the rest of the audience. At the close of today's webinar, we will have a quick survey pop up just with a few questions, letting us know how we did today and what you'd like to see us cover in future webinars. And with that said, I will turn things over to my colleague, Kim Mallett, to get things started.
Thanks, Lauren. Welcome. As Lauren said, my name is Kim Mallett, and I'm a director in Major Lindsey Africa's partner practice group. This is our first webinar for 2025 and the third in the Women of Color Partner Forum series that Sarah Van Steenberg and I founded in 2021 or 22. Today, our panelists will explore the profound impact of the new administration on the business practices and opportunities for law firm partners who are also women of color. We'll embark on a journey to understand how these changes shape our strategies, client interactions, and the essence of how best to position ourselves in this new reality. Our conversation will focus on understanding the new administration's impact on business practices and opportunities, specifically for women of color. We aim to explore how the change influences the development of business strategies, client interactions, and overall the firm's positioning of themselves. We also will seek to identify any strategic shifts within your firm to capitalize on the new business opportunities arising from the change in administration. It occurs to me that we are now often hearing that this administration is quote unquote business friendly. But what does that mean? And especially for people in this group. In the spirit of Toni Morrison, one of my favorite authors, let us remember that our stories, our voices, and our experiences are not just important, they're essential. As we navigate this new landscape, let us embrace the power of our collective wisdom. We invite you to share your insights, triumphs, and challenges. Let us inspire each other and be inspired by each other. For this space is a safe one, and we are not just colleagues here, but we are forming community, and a community bound by a shared commitment to excellence and innovation. Thank you so much for being here. Let us make this discussion a memorable and impactful experience. And let's get started. I now invite our three panelists to introduce themselves, after which I will get the ball rolling with questions.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christine Navarez, and I'm the managing partner of Fragum in Silicon Valley practice. We are a corporate immigration law firm. So, as you can imagine, the last couple of months have been very, very interesting, but I'm very happy to be here with this amazing group of women.
Hi, everybody. My name is Arlene Ortiz Leite. I am a partner in the M&A and private equity practice at Kramer Levin in New York City. Soon, in a couple months, we'll be merging with Herbert Smith Freehills, an international law firm headquartered in London. So there will be some changes for us in the coming years. So my practice is pretty broad. I assist corporate clients and private equity funds and their portfolio companies on a variety of transactions throughout their investment lifecycle. This includes mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, debt and equity instruments, carve-outs, et cetera. And I span a variety of industries, including chemicals, investment services, finance, fashion, food, transportation, et cetera. It's so I can touch mostly every industry around.
Thanks, Arlene. Hi, I'm, well, it's early in California. My name is Merle Vaughn. I am the managing partner of the Southern California offices for Major Lindsey Africa. I am a recovering lawyer. I practiced in big law for an AmLaw 20 firm, and then I was a GC for a Black hair care company before becoming a legal recruiter. And I am also the law firm diversity practice leader for Major Lindsey Africa. And I've been recruiting for over 20 years, and I've been at MLA for, I'm starting my 14th year.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And my first question is, how does this change in administration affect your practice area? And for you, Merle, how is it affecting the way that you recruit? Are you focusing on certain practice areas and not others? I'll leave it to you.
That is a great question. And you know, it's a hard one to answer because everything is changing so quickly. It's such a dynamic time. You kind of don't know when you wake up in the morning what the latest executive order is going to be, and how that's going to affect, my practice. But my practice is, affected by every other lawyer's practice. So, in terms of the overall big picture of practice, placing lawyers with law firms, it hasn't, affected it because law firms are still looking for partners. They're still looking for talent. They're still looking for people who can be accretive to the bottom line and add experience especially in areas where they are lacking or have a dearth of experience. More granularly, it is a good question with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion, whether or not law firms, how they're going to react. I mean, we've all seen that there's some law firms who have, backed off of their statements. There are law firms who have just gotten creative about how they continue, but how they signal that to the public. And so it's just early. It's really, really early. I haven't had anybody tell me to go away at this point, which is a good sign. I have had a couple of firms, or a few firms that have still reached out to me and asked me to meet with them to, set up meetings. And so I think it's always been which firms are really committed to equity and inclusion, and which firms are just checking a box. And so I think this is just gonna, further show who those put a spotlight on who those firms are.
Absolutely. And for Christy and Arlene, given that you are, within the firm space, are you seeing these sort of changes affecting either your practice area or the firm more generally? Or is this notion of this administration being, good for business something that you're starting to see play out or not?
I can go ahead and start, Arlene, and then love to hear your perspective on this too. I know that you have a pretty, like you say, wide grouping of industry, so that would be interesting. For me, our clients are mostly Silicon Valley high tech companies, and so there's been a lot of discussion since that last week in December about how this administration is going to look at business and immigration intertwined. You have Elon Musk now with a role in the administration who is focusing on business and kind of talking about the benefits of the business-based immigration programs. And then you have the MAGA supporters who are not in favor of immigration of any type. And so there's a little bit of push and pull, and how that will all shake out is we're all waiting to hear. But just to echo what Merle said, every day it's something new. There's a new executive order. There's a new story that we hear about someone who is stuck at a consulate outside of the United States with the new extreme vetting protocols that are in place. And so having people stranded overseas or having trouble getting into the country, there's a conversation with a Colombian president, and all of a sudden we're worried about Colombian nationals being able to enter. And from one day to the next, it's really been very complicated. But we can look back to President Trump's first administration to see what happened there. And then in addition, kind of listen to what he said on the campaign trail and what his staffers are saying, the secretaries that have been confirmed are saying, and understand that it's going to be a long road. It's going to be a road with some, uncertainty, maybe some inconsistency. So having that partnership with our clients to make sure that we're being as transparent as we can to know what's happening as of yesterday is really been key to making sure that we are staying, really from minute to minute on top of what's happening.
Yeah, and from my perspective, really in the M&A and PE world, it's, whenever we get a deal that we work on, somebody will have had enough confidence in the project to hire us and get us going on a project. So just from our anecdotal, the last month or so, and then today, this morning, the Wall Street Journal did report on it. It is in fact that the what everybody assumed would happen, that a lot of business would come, a lot of deals would occur, really hasn't materialized. This January itself was the quietest deal making January in a decade. So there were only 900 deals announced for the last month. Last year in January, there were 1,200 deals. The year before, there were 1,500 deals. So it's really a significant decline in deal making, which, of course, if you're a lawyer at a big firm or a smaller firm doing transactions, it makes it harder to find business. And if you kind of look at what business leaders are saying, is that they do feel that this time is really fragile, volatile, and they're just waiting to see what happens. And in some ways, this was kind of the same message we've been getting from the market the last year or two after there was a huge spike in activity right after COVID. But now it's actually worse than it was, given all of the points that business leaders are putting out there. And I'm sure from the news, the things that have been happening are really hitting hardest in this confidence, which are tariffs, deportations, and the uncertainty in the federal workforce. And I think unlike the first administration, where there was a lot of talk and certain actions, this time the administration came out with a very well planned plan to execute on day one, right? So tariffs and deportations especially hit the bottom line in a very tangible way. That again is eroding confidence in making deals, getting deals done, etc. So unfortunately, I think we're going to see a very choppy M&A market, at least for the next couple of months, potentially the next quarter, when hopefully there's a little bit more visibility as to what we can take as certain or versus not, gets us to a better place and a little bit more deal making. But at this juncture, unfortunately, like the high hopes haven't materialized.
Well, and the other thing that's causing uncertainty is the consumer's reaction to all this, right? So, I saw a headline this morning. I didn't have time to read it, but I saw a headline this morning that Target has lost a lot of money between the lawsuit that was filed by their stockholders and the boycott that's going on by people of color. And so, not only are a lot of people in this country not spending any money, as in reaction to what's going on, the companies don't know what's going to happen with respect to their bottom line.
I
Yeah,
think from
there's
a workforce perspective too, at least here in high tech, there's some uncertainty as well when you have, sponsored employees at the heart of at a lot of these technologies companies. There's a concern, if petitions start getting denied and challenged and revoked, what does that mean for your workforce? What does that mean for your site strategy about hiring in the United States? For some companies, I think they're worried that they're going to have to start hiring outside of the United States. And what is that effect going to have on the economy as well? So it's pretty tenuous right now, I would say.
yeah, and I wanted to actually throw another perspective into the mix from one of a question that's just come in, and it reads, for law firms that are federal contractors, it's not a question of commitment to diversity, it is the chilling effect of False Claims Act and Ketum litigation and the possibility of criminal prosecution for those who engage in quote unquote illegal DEI. What is your advice to federal contractors and subcontractors about how to move forward?
Wow.
And I'll just open the floor to anyone who wants to jump in.
I don't think any of us are federal contractors, so I think it might be malpractice for us to try to answer that question. But I will say that, that would be, if I were a federal contract, I'd be really concerned, because not only is there a chilling effect from everything that's going on, but also there's been money that has been revoked, right, from the administration, and payments are not being made, and all that. So, if I would imagine, from a recruiter's position, I would imagine that folks who are working for government contractors are reconsidering whether or not they're in the right place, and whether they should stay where they are or seek, employment, that it's in the more in the public sector. But in terms of, what those firms should be doing, I can't. I'm not qualified to answer that.
Christy or Arlene, do either one of you want to take a stab at that, or should we move on to another question?
Well, probably not about the criminal prosecution and the liability on that, but I do think that there are a lot of law firms that, really to Merle's earlier point, that are going to show their true identity as a firm and their true culture as a firm. We've been, from a local perspective, continuing to make sure our employees are heard and, appreciate the education component that we're focusing on, the inclusion component that we're focusing on, and just making sure that our employees are feeling taken care of, especially in this stressful time. There's a lot of uncertainty that come from our clients, from their sponsored employees, and I think this is when it really matters to see how your employees are feeling from a day-to-day perspective, and making sure they feel safe and included. And so we're doing what we can from a local perspective, certainly, but even as a firm, that commitment kind of permeates through all of our offices. And how you approach it, I think, is a business decision, but we're certainly doing what we can, within our local offices to make sure that the employees have that space, and be able to be proud of what they know, to share information about their culture, about their background, and to have them bring their authentic selves to work. That's what I think makes our team so strong, and our partnership with our clients so strong as well.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I would add is if your firm has technically a client, a contact within the federal agency that is contracting you, don't be afraid to just reach out to them on a friendly basis, just to check in, not necessarily about business, just it is kind of client development at the end of the day, right? And they may not have answers for you because they probably haven't received official guidance or the right guidance from their superiors as to what's going to happen next. But just keeping up with them, I think, doesn't hurt. And it's not necessarily a DEI initiative for you to, as their lawyer, just check in with them, see how things are going, and keep being top of mind with them, separate and apart of whether or not technically your contract was part of a DEI effort or not.
And I want to sort of, continue talking about DEI a bit more because it's so much in the news right now. But obviously, as you've all said, the pendulum has swung, right? So I'm wondering what sorts of changes you're seeing, if you are seeing any. Merle, you mentioned that people are still reaching out to you. No one has said to you, go away with your, DEI recruiting. Christy, you're a managing partner. What are you, and you mentioned that you're trying to make sure that people feel that they can bring their authentic selves to the office, and, making people who may be different feel welcome, right? Arlene, I don't know if you're involved in recruiting efforts, but I'm wondering if there's anything that's been circulated within the firm, with regards to the merger that's talked about this. You're merging with a huge foreign entity. Can we talk a little bit about how DEI may be showing up, but in a different way than we're used to talking about it quite openly? Is there now, are there now people who are still trying to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a part of their recruiting efforts, but are perhaps taking a more roundabout route to that end in terms of language and just how they're reaching out to you?
Can I just say, Kim, first,
Yeah.
that in terms of DEI recruiting, there really, there's no such thing as DEI recruiting, right? The really what that means at MLA is making sure that everyone is being considered, right? So nobody, no firm is saying only bring me, a person who looks like this, or only bring me someone like, who looks like this. They may say only bring me someone who does this, but a firm may say, we know that Major Lindsey in Africa is known for providing the best and the brightest, and that you will go the extra mile to make sure that everyone is being considered, and I call that, not just recruiting the low-hanging fruit, right? Actually going that extra mile to find people who are probably overqualified, for the position. So I just want to make that clear. And so from our perspective, we don't have to do anything differently. We just have to stay the course, right? And then the other thing that I'll say is, and I've been saying this for a while, the calling something, the DEI is kind of what the problem is, right? So, I don't care what you call it. Just be fair.
Right.
Just be fair, right? And we can drop the D, diversity, as far as I'm concerned, because people are not diverse. People provide diversity, and we're the diversity exists, and it's not going away. It is not going away, which is where all of this comes from, like the fear of losing power, the fear of being annexed, which is pretty ridiculous. But fear is a big motivator, right? So, let's but if D bothers people, then talk to them about the E, the equity, right? Which is just equal. Like just treat people equally. If equal, God forbid, somebody has a problem with, talk to them about the I. you know, and so the problem is that this very important initiative has been relegated, to just three letters, and
Yeah.
it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's totally been hijacked, right? And thank you for that, Merle, because one of the things that it reminds us all is that at least at Major Lindsey Africa, what we try to do is always present a diverse roster of candidates who are incredibly appropriate for whatever, they're qualified beyond qualifications for whatever position they're being presented for. And yeah, so that's why I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you're seeing, Christy and Arlene, with what Merle just underlined for us in terms of the work that you are all doing. And Arlene, and I'm not sure if you're involved in recruiting per se, but again, if you see or have heard about how the new, I don't know, is it Kramer 11 HSF or HSF Kramer will be approaching recruiting to, is it something that they're looking to ensure that they have diverse candidates, obviously well-qualified candidates who are from diverse, and diverse doesn't necessarily, as Merle pointed out, mean what you look like, but diverse backgrounds. Is that something that seems to be important for the newly merged or merging firms? And Christy, how are you, in your position, right, as a managing partner? You mentioned that you're going the extra mile in your office. What are you doing that you find has been helpful to the members of your team who are there, to assure them that they are fine, and also to attract other people to Fragaman, to your office?
Yeah, so we have a pretty robust summer law clerk program and summer associate program. And I agree with how you position that, Kim. You want everyone to be able to have a chance, right? You want to give everybody that opportunity. These are candidates that we're getting from law schools all over who understand what the firm's needs are, and to be able to provide kind of a robust slate of candidates to make sure that we're getting, the best people with that will, enrich our firm, enrich our teams in the biggest ways. So we still have that commitment from that perspective. And we are not shy about it, right? We post about the events that we do. We share that information. We, collaborate with clients sometimes on some of these events. And so it's a part of who we are. And I think being proud of that is important. What I do see a lot of, of the HR consultants or even some of the clients do is really more about the semantics of it. To Merle's point, it's about, well, we can't say the word equity anymore. So we're going to have the same program, but it's going to be a wellness program, or it's going to be an inclusion program, but the substance hasn't changed a whole lot from what I've seen from what at least some of our clients are doing, and some of our friends in the law firm space are doing. They're just kind of positioning things a little bit different. So I agree. It doesn't matter what letter you use, what word you use, as long as the goal is being accomplished, and that you're being able to provide that equal chance. I think that's what's key. That's what we're trying. That's what I'm trying to keep in mind anyway. I don't know, Arlene, if you have a different take on that, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's very similar. So we do have pretty regular programming internally at the firm, with diversity in mind. Every month we'll have a different speaker, present on a book, present on an issue. We host an Equal Justice Fellow every year, and her project was about diversity in juries in New York City. So she came and did a presentation on her research and the work she's trying to do this year with her fellowship. So really the substance, again, of what we do day in and day out doesn't really change, because our workplace is interested in these topics and they show up. Maybe partially it's the free lunch, but I think it's also about learning about what our colleagues and what's out there. So again, yeah, the substance hasn't changed. And with respect to the merger, our partner firm, HSF, they kind of have built-in diversity because they're in almost every continent, really, right? You have a great, strong Asian presence from Australia, the UK, very parts of Europe, South Africa, other parts of Africa. So it is a much more diverse firm than Kramer Levin is. And their leadership really reflects it as well. So as an institution, they have a very strong inclusion mandate from abroad, that we get to enjoy as well. Not that we didn't do that beforehand, but I think because they come with such a strong infrastructure for DEI, although I don't think they technically call it DEI abroad, like we get to benefit from all the programming that they've already have in their system. But as far as recruiting, it really is, not a lot has changed, right? But I think the problem that firms are having is that the whole 1L, 2L recruiting timeline has really shifted, and all those interviews are happening basically now or
Right.
next summer. So we kind of have to just make sure the pipeline still works, that students from underrepresented minorities or other diverse students know that they should be applying, so that we can see their materials. And then they're in the pipeline along with everybody else who's applying. But it's just that self-selection I think, is the hardest thing we have to fight against, to make sure we're getting the candidates, to review all the candidates and interview them. Because the way the law schools are working now, by the time you get to your on-campus interview session in early fall, late summer, like 80% of those spots are already filled, right? And it puts you at a huge disadvantage.
And it doesn't stop at the recruiting, right? It's good. It's an ongoing process with retention. And that's, where I feel that inclusion part is so important. Mentorship is a passion of mine. It's a favorite part of my job, and being able to have that space where you can talk to people and say, well, of course you can do this. Of course you can be the keynote speaker at this conference with all of the Fortune 50 companies attending, because you're brilliant and you deserve it, and making sure that people feel that support is really critical. But I think that retention, piece of it, and keeping your extraordinary talent motivated and always looking for the next thing, and feeling prepared is what's really important. And I know that I'm coming from a much different place, because I think in general, immigration tends to draw a lot of women, a lot of people of color. I say this to some of my law school friends and their mouth falls open, but I'm lucky to be, a part of a of a partnership in Silicon Valley where we are all women. And the majority of us are women of color. So it's a really unusual position, but I tell you, it makes a difference. It makes a difference on, when we're, kind of giving different perspectives and arguing in our partner meetings and how that conversation goes and the resolution that we come to and the service that we're able to provide. It really makes a big difference. But I do know that not very many women can say that. So I am grateful for that.
That's amazing. I also would say that there's a mentorship and sponsorship, have always been important, and they are probably even more important now during these trying times. And I was interviewing the co-president of a big firm for my podcast the other day, and something that he said struck me. He said, when you are at a law firm, you're not promoted up. You're not promoted to the partnership. You're pulled up by someone within the partnership. And I thought that those were, I had never heard it
Right.
put that way before, but it's true. And his point was, that, relationships are so important, and finding someone who is going to pull you up within the firm is really important. And he told a story about how that didn't happen at his first firm, and he went to the next firm, and it did happen. And so, it's just something for people to think about. If you do need mentors, you do need sponsors, and if you don't have that where you are, then you need to find someone outside who can help you, or you need to find someplace else that's a better fit.
Check out Merle's podcast, everyone. It's called BS, Beyond Stereotypes. It's very cool. I listen to it all the time, and always a lot of knowledge there. So do check that out. And thank you. Yeah, I think that I'd love to pick up on something that you all said, but I want to direct it to you, Arlene. Sponsorship within a big firm. You are, you're a corporate lawyer, right? So you're out there meeting and greeting, trying to generate business and gather clients. How are you doing that? Did you have a sponsor within the firm to sort of help you, show you the way, or someone who made introductions, or was talking you up in those meetings where you were not, necessarily present? How did you do that? And I did want to also just say, Christy, I mean, you are your firm is a unicorn,
Yeah.
because that's what we want to hear, is that there are law firms where the majority, at least, in I guess in Silicon Valley, where the majority of the partners are women, and especially women of color. That is not what we're seeing in New York. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about how that came into being. Is it simply, as you alluded to in when you were speaking, the fact that your practice area, immigration, attracts women, and especially women of color? So let's start with Arlene. And Arlene, my question to you is, how are you, how did you learn? How did you come to understand how to generate business, how to get clients? Is that something that you just sort of watched as you were coming up as an associate, or did you have a sponsor within the firm who, said, this is what you do, this is how you do it, here are some people you should talk to, for possible relationships that you'll be able to develop into business?
Yeah, and to be frank, I think I'm still learning, and business development is something that a skill that you're always honing because the universe is always changing out there on you. So I will say that this was one of the key reasons why I came to Kramer Levin. It is a much smaller firm than my previous firm. So my previous firm, I was at Kirkland here in New York, enormous firm. Like you don't actually need to develop business because there's just mountains of work waiting for you, right? Versus at a smaller firm, it's a lot more entrepreneurial. You know everybody in your department, and they come in because they feel like they trust you to do the work with them, to be good partners. And I think this is a theme that I'm hearing is, in this time, having great partners is critical. Partners you actually know and who respect you and you respect them and who have your best interest in mind. It's frankly just a little bit harder in a bigger organization because the partnership could be hundreds, if not thousands of people. When you see them every day on your floor, like you develop relationships with them. But yeah, coming back to the question, you do end up working with other of the partners' clients, getting to know them and working with them more closely. You you talk to people, including your other partners, like how do you know this person? Could you make an introduction to this person? I see on LinkedIn that you're connected with this guy and this guy's connected to this person. And that's kind of how you generate business and start talking to people, is literally meeting people and asking for introductions. And I think your initial meetings are not always like, oh, please hire me. It's what can I do for you? And it's usually going to be free, right? Like you just help them out with something and you develop that rapport. So I think at a general level, it really is creating those relationships and not necessarily being opportunistic, but it's about being genuine in what you're looking for and trying to find people you like, because obviously you want to have clients you like, that you have some control over who you're doing work with, right? And I think the last point on this, it's also just being authentic to what you want your practice to look like. So one thing I'm really interested is impact investing. And so I've already worked with one client who does that, and I've learned of other new funds that are doing similar work. And obviously it turns out they all kind of know each other. So it's about making sure you're asking the right folks, hey, can you put me on an email with this person? I'd really like to meet them. And that's how you generally develop these relationships. It's frankly not easy, but you kind of have to make yourself a little vulnerable and put yourself out there.
Let me follow up on that a little bit, Arlene, if you could unpack it a little bit more for us. So what do you do if, we all know that law firms, big law can sometimes be very, what's the word? I'm trying to be polite, but the environments can be really difficult, right? And especially for women and especially for women of color. So what do you do if you want to show up as your authentic self, but you're in, what is if effectively a hostile environment? How do you then do some of the things that you just talked about in reaching out to your partners and, saying, I noticed that 6 degrees of separation to this person. Can you make the introduction? How do you do that? And is it that you make it really transactional where you say, if I can make this happen, maybe we can work on this deal together? What is it that you do that if you have any sort of trade secrets that you want to share with us? Even though Kramer may
Yeah.
not be hostile. So,
Yeah, I
but
will say that's true. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think it would be difficult, but to one extent it is, especially if you've developed a really close working relationship with the client of that other partner. They can't just ignore you to some extent, right? Because you're the person delivering good services to that client, so you do have that transactional value to that individual. So I think step one is doing great work. And the second one is try to find your people, really. If it's not this set of partners, don't feel free to like go and meet partners in other groups. So we at Kramer Levin have a collaboration committee where a couple folks from every practice group get together every month at least, and brainstorm how do we cross-sell our services to clients in other departments. So we have a pretty large real estate practice, for example, and I've worked across from some of their clients. So how do we not make those adversarial relationships on the corporate side, but actually make those our clients also on the corporate side, for example? And so even if the folks you jive with a little bit better are in IP or tax or litigation, there are business opportunities there, even if they don't look so clear cut.
Well, and I think that's even more important in this environment, right? This is what we're talking about, is that the administration has impacted law firm management so profoundly that a lot of people have to look outside of their practice areas or their normal groups, affinity groups, to help build their practice out. I want to take a little bit of a turn here in our conversation and talk a little bit more inwardly. You know, how do all three of you approach the notion of self-care? At the end of the last election, there were all these women of color saying, "I'm done. I'm only taking care of myself now. That I'm finished. I've tried. I can't anymore." Which is understandable, right? But we also at some point we have to lean in and bear witness to what is happening. Someone has to do that, but you can't, not always the same people all the time. So I'm wondering, how are you, leaning into your community, leaning into your friends and family and loved ones under this new normal?
I'll start. I'm pretty vocal. People are like, don't, if you don't want to be posted on Facebook, don't take a picture with Merle, because she's going to post you and she's going to tell you everything she just did. And so, but one of the things that I decided, was, yeah, I am tired. I was very disappointed in the outcome. I felt like I did everything I was supposed to do, and the folks who are people are going to be negatively affected, who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and that is coming to fruition, right? But I just decided, one, I have to take care of myself. I have to. So like this weekend, I took a hiatus from social media, which was really, really hard. And I just said, I'm not gonna doom scroll. I'm not gonna click, bait. I'm not gonna do the clickbait. I'm not gonna do any of that. I'll look at stuff that's fun. I'll look at stuff that's informative, but I'm just not gonna participate in that. And it was hard, but it was very helpful in terms of, leaning in irrespective of that. I'm not shopping phase, which is I am a shopper. I've always been a shopper. Um, Retail therapy is my favorite therapy, although I do suggest everyone have a therapist. I have one. But, I'm not buying anything from certain stores. And I am posting about that. And I think kind of have to hit them in their pocketbook, and show, that we have collective power with respect to money, because that's all that seems to matter these days is money. I think somebody else pointed that out earlier. And so, that's what I'm doing. I am taking care of myself. I am, taking time off to unwind. But then, on Monday, I'm back at, trying to influence people to care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm taking a similar approach, but I start with wine instead of shopping. That was a really rough weekend, and but after I got through the wine I needed to get through, you kind of dust yourself off and get back into it. We had a 2025 planning meeting with our leadership team, and I brought in a facilitator that focused on resiliency and EQ, just to make sure we were all able to kind of tap into knowing there was going to be hard times. How do we handle that? How do we rally? When do we need to step away and take that break and stop the doom scrolling? And that I love that, Merle. That's so great. I'm going to use that because I think you can go down a rabbit hole with that. And I think everyone needs their time to do that, to just say, okay, like I'm out for tomorrow. I'm out for this weekend. But I'll be back, and I'm gonna, be there to rally. But having that insight to be able to say, to know when you need that break, I think is the key. For us with all of the changes from one day to the next, it's gonna be a long 4 years. So, you have to look at it as a marathon as well, and have those outlets where you can. And we have a big pro bono component to the firm. So while we're a corporate immigration firm, we do a lot of pro bono. So seeing the students that are out there that need help, the family-based kind of crisis cases that are out there, and doing just a little bit, that we can do means so much. We have clinics that we do with attorneys who aren't immigration attorneys, that will just do kind of a prep session about how to do a citizenship application if people are nervous, even as green card holders, and helping the individuals kind of one by one. It feels like you're accomplishing a lot with not really too much time, and that seems to help a lot too.
No, I echo all of the above. The one thing I would add is just, I think our work can feel sometimes all consuming, and sometimes it unfortunately is, but when it's not, make sure you take care of yourself. So make sure you you have your annual doctor's appointments, see all the specialists you need to see. It's something that's so easy to fall through the cracks, and you just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself at a really fundamental level like that, because it's so easy to forget. And personally, I've been reading a lot more. I was never really a reader as a kid, but I feel myself reading every night, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, usually fiction. It's really helpful to have just a completely different thing to read that isn't a contract. So that's super helpful. I also like to play music, again, just using the other side of my brain. Coordinating my fingers with my breaths, with the music notes in front of me. I play the flute. I don't get to do it every day or multiple times a week, but the one time a week I get to do it, I just feel so much better because I've used my focus in a different way.
And
I love that.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
that my therapist suggested that I do is meditate every morning. And she said, just do a 3-minute meditation. Place your hands over your heart, set a timer for 3 minutes, and just do deep breathing and think, and basically just think about what you're grateful for that morning. No matter what it is, there's always something or somebody you're grateful for. And for 3 minutes, do that. And it's pretty amazing, the effect and calming effect, but also the effect that can have throughout the day.
Nice. I love
It's
that.
brilliant. The meditation
Music one and
and the
meditation.
meditation and the
Kristen.
flute sound amazing and so sophisticated. The other thing I do, I'll play Bad Bunny really loud and dance. And that helps too.
I love that. Well, music, wine, and meditation and dancing to Bad Bunny all sound amazing, and definitely in these times when we all are trying to hold on to some composure because the news is just often so frightening. I did want to make sure that we hit on a couple of the questions that came into the chat. So we've got one that says, as someone who's actively considering a return to private practice and who has cultivated many connections with business contacts who are now general counsels, etc., how do you help convince private firms that your business generation ability is real and concrete in spite of the fact that firms seem to disbelieve that because you're a younger looking woman of color, you can't, you're not able to do that?
Well, I guess
Arlene, yeah.
I-
I was gonna say, Arlene, this sounds, made for you.
It's hard because it depends on the institution you're going into, especially if there's a difference between equity and non-equity partner. I think on the non-equity side, it's a little bit easier because you can have like a little bit of um a time frame in which these relationships materialize and you show the value, and that's a little bit easier. um but as far as use, I think what would be really helpful, especially if there's overlap between the GCs and clients of the firms you're targeting, like have them call and be your reference. That's kind of critical, right? And especially if you've worked across from or with the partners or other attorneys in the firms you're targeting, again, nothing is more helpful than having the reference of somebody you've worked with, right? With or across, or who can give you that validity. It's otherwise it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, what you're going to have to do is have a business plan. So, a written business plan that sets forth, what you've done in the past, what you want to do, who your relationships are with, and how you're going to monetize those. And to Arlene's point, you can do the research, or you can work with a recruiter to figure out which firms already have synergies with the clients that you have opportunity, that you have relationship with whom you have relationships, because firms are always looking for a creative business, and so to the extent that you can add to business, that they bring in more business from clients that they already have, that would be interesting to them.
And then I know we're almost wrapping up, so I wanted to ask one more question that came in the chat, and I'll just go from who first on my screen. So Christy, I'll start with you, and then Arlene, and then Merle. How do you lead as a woman of color partner in this moment, most especially in this time where people do not feel safe?
That's a big question. I think a little bit about what I said before of trying to make room in the office from a cultural perspective to give everybody that space to feel safe. So, it's not just about the lunch that we're having during Lunar New Year. It's about the education component, to have someone to share something about their how they were trained in Chinese characters and calligraphy, and really have that knowledge background and have that respected, is, I think is a big part of it, but it's not easy. I make a lot of mistakes on that. I'm always trying to get better and better, but just trying to carve out that space, I think, is what's key.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think for us, especially in the hybrid environment and folks who maybe find it harder to get into the office after COVID, it's really being present, like being in the office, being with the other partners, being an active voice in meetings with other partners is one of the keys to leadership in this time. You might feel better and safer kind of stepping away a little bit and not being as visible, but this is kind of the time you have to be there. And it's the same thing I tell all the associates is you have to be here. People have to see you because people forget if you're not in their face all the time, right? Especially in the corporate environment. So number one, just be here and speak up. And just generally, especially in my line of work, it's having a thick skin, but also having a really good sense of decency and creating a good environment for all the parties you're working with. And I always feel like when people are rude to me, usually from the other side, and it's usually not lawyers, it's business people on the other side. I'm like, oh, I'm doing a good job. That's great. So just kind of have it with that attitude. It's don't you probably have a thick skin because you've made it this far, but just remind yourself that it's it's an everyday reminder that this is kind of how the industry works and you're doing a great job, and just keep going.
And I'll end by saying, I think for me the key is to lead authentically, and be true to myself, but also with compassion and empathy, and not be afraid to show vulnerability, because I think as a leader, people are trying to figure out what's okay to say, or how it's okay to be. And I think that if people understand that all you can do is be yourself, and recognize that everybody's different, and different is good. And uh, everybody's not going to be thinking about things the same way that you do, because everybody has different life experiences. um, so we have to respect that, and we have to at the same time protect our peace.
Perfect ending. Thank you, Merle. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Arlene. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Sarah Van Steenberg, who's going to talk a little bit about what this series is about and what to expect. And, I just want to leave with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Audre Lorde, who said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare." So with that, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Kim, for moderating today. And thank you, Merle, Christy, and Arlene for being here and participating. Kim and I are really looking forward to kicking off this year with this forum for partners of color, women partners of color in particular. We know that law firms are difficult spaces to navigate, and we believe a forum where we can talk about those differences and how we can build business. Our goal really is to create a community that is educational, supportive, soul-filling, that this is a safe space where you can come and connect with other women of color partners and talk about things from your own perspective. And we feel like that doesn't happen enough, especially in these kind of crazy times. And so we have a programming coming up. We're looking at doing another webinar focused really on business development, cracking that code to become a rainmaker, because our goal would be to help you guys all become rainmakers, because that's the true freedom, as we know, within firms. And it doesn't matter what the firm's DEI policy is and whatnot. If you are driving dollars, you have a voice, and you will be a powerful presence there, and will be able to affect a lot of change. So we'd like to make you all as successful as possible, and bring others along on that journey as well. So we've got a webinar about BD coming up at the end of beginning of the summer, and then we also want to do one in-person meeting probably around Christmas time. So please stay tuned for more information as those kinds of things roll out. And then to kind of create connective tissue between us, we also want to, once a quarter, you'll be hearing from us with an article, or just sending out something that we have thought that might be particularly of interest to this group, as a way to continue to keep connected. And if you have any questions, or is there any programming you want to see from this group, please let us know. We are absolutely open to suggestions, and are looking forward to building out this community. So thank you guys for helping us kick 2025 off in such a strong way. Have a great day.